Sure. So Abhishek is asking what is this vector of int colon colon iterator IT? Essentially, when you have an aggregator, which means let's say a vector or a list or let's say even some sort of collection. Right? Then when you have a large number of elements pushed together into a collector, then many of these collectors or aggregates provide a way to iterate over the elements. Now, iterating over the elements can also be cast as an abstract way, which can be uniform across all collections. Right? Although the element per se will differ depending upon the type, but the way you access elements, oh, just need to take the first element and then go to the next element and so on. So this is provided by an abstraction called iterator. And that iterator is dependent on the type, of course. I mean, whether it is a vector or an array or a tree or linked list, etc. But that way it is going to be common across all the different types, colon colon iterator, meaning that a particular type like vector of int is going to be deciding how the iterator is going to look like. So that is what this IT is. So that iterator is a type which is provided in the vector class, and that IT is a variable of that type that you are defining. Now, how do you access it? Well, you can say it.begin, it.end, and it++. So all of these functions are provided in that iterator class. And that iterator, yes. So the iterator method is, I'm not sure if it is defined inside the vector class in this case, since it is, yeah, I think it will have to be inside the vector class because we are using the scope resolution operator colon colon. So yes, it will be inside the, I mean, let me put it this way, that there is a base iterator which is going to be common, and from there we are going to derive using inheritance this vector iterator class which is going to be inside the vector iterator. So yeah, using that you can iterate through different elements, but then for vector you can as well iterate through it using index, like we do int I equal to 0, I less than vector dot size or length and I++. So similarly here, using iterator you will be able to do it for everybody, every collection. It could be vector, it could be list. So you just write list of int colon colon iterator IT. Rest of the code remains almost the same. Any other concerns? All right, so we'll start the class. I'm on a little unreliable network today, so in case I lose connection or you see that I have just stopped speaking in between, just keep waiting for a couple of minutes. I'll be back. Okay, so let's start discussing about a variation of the list, which is a specialization of the list, I should say, which is called as a stack, which we have seen on multiple occasions, but we are going to now code it up. So as is seen, this stack of plates is definitely one good example of a stack. And what all can you do with this stack? Essentially, if you want to insert a plate, you'll mostly insert it at the top, right? Unless you are very ambitious. So general public like me will insert the plate only at the top. And when somebody has to take out the plate, general public like me will also take out the plate from the top of the stack. If I have to check how many plates are there, I can count it externally by checking each plate either top to bottom or bottom to top. That facility may not be there in your stack implementation. And then I can also check if the stack is full or empty. In this case, the stack will probably never get full unless maybe it reaches the ceiling or something. Or in some of the implementations, whether the stack is full, that question will come up, especially when you are using a fixed size array to represent the stack. So that is where the implementation part comes into picture. But then whether the stack is empty is a common operation because I'm interested in a plate and there is no plate in the stack. So in such cases, I definitely want to know if the plate is there or not, if the stack is empty or not. So these operations do come up in the context of stack ADTs. Another interesting example which one of my former PhD student had given was this one, that the bangles in the hand are essentially forming a stack. You cannot take out a bangle arbitrarily. Of course, there are variants which you can think about, that the bangle is very large and therefore you can take it out of order, etc. But by and large, I suppose you get that feeling. Similarly, when you are inside an aeroplane, you have a window seat, middle seat, or aisle, and if you are at the window seat and the mid seat and the aisle are already full, and you want to get seated at your seat, then you have to ask the person who is at the aisle and mid to come out. Then you will go, and then they will take their positions. Interestingly, the middle seat person cannot come out first, right? So it's the aisle person who has to come out first. So in this case also, it resembles a stack. Okay, any other examples of stack anybody has seen? Okay, I don't see any responses. So maybe I have covered all the real world scenarios of stack. All right, so let's cookies from a pack. That's correct. So you have a pack of biscuits and you have to take it out. And assuming that you have not opened it completely, then you have to take it out one by one. Pringles, sure. Yeah, don't eat too much of them, but it's okay. Yes, that's a valid example. Getting in and out of an elevator. Okay, so that's also very interesting example, because some of the elevators which are large, typically, you will face this problem, especially in hospitals or somewhere if you go. And of course, there are sometimes multiple exit points also, but typically it is the way the last person who enters is the first one to come out. Right? The first person to enter is usually the last one to come out. So yes, these are also very good examples of stacks, as Murari, Anish, and Anutosh have suggested. Good. So let's move ahead from here. So we are saying that it is a special form of list, which means that you can impose certain restrictions on the list to get a stack, right? And those restrictions we are going to see soon. But essentially, you can imagine that the insertion and deletion cannot happen at arbitrary places. As soon as you pose that restriction, essentially what you get is a stack data type, and those operations are restricted at one end. And then there is a change of nomenclature also. Instead of inserting, I say that I push an element into the stack, or I push a plate onto the stack, right? And removal becomes a pop. So then insert and remove become push and pop operations. And these are quite specific to stack ADT. And as I was mentioning, that the last person in has to be the first one to come out. So the last plate in has to be the first one to get removed, and so on. So this is called as last in, first out. I have not, I mean, you can as well call it first in, last out, but I have not seen that nomenclature being used. So it's the LIFO property that gets satisfied by this stack. And by and large, we cannot access arbitrary element, right? So if you want to access arbitrary element, why do you need a stack? You can as well go for a list or an array. So the important part here is that since we are talking about only the ADT, we currently don't know how the implementation is. It could be linked list based, it could be array based, it could be something else. So that's again another important point, like we did in case of lists. So let's define that ADT, right? So okay, so before that, I think we have, yeah. So let's define that ADT. Class list is what we will implement in. We implemented for the list, where we had insert, remove, search, size, and I have corrected that void search and print function, and maybe there were other functions which were there. Now in the context of stack, I essentially have a class stack, and insert becomes push. I need the element to be pushed as a parameter. And how will be the signature for pop? Removal becomes pop. So how will be the signature of pop? Okay, Sai Charan says void pop. Aniruddha says data type pop. Indira says bool pop. Oh, I see. So, okay, Salman says pop element. Any other suggestions? Okay, so that's interesting. So, why three of you are saying that it should be only uh, uh, a signature without any function argument, right? Uh, so the reason being that you are always going to remove only the last element. I mean, last element only the top element, top of the stack, and therefore you don't have any luxury of specifying which element you want to remove. Therefore, we will not be able to pass a parameter. We don't need to. Right? We don't need to pass a parameter to any of to the pop method, and whatever is the stack top, that is going to get written. You don't have a flexibility to uh, let's say remove a particular element from the stack. Right? Does that seem reasonable, Salman? Yeah, good. So the searching of an element, well, you may not provide that at all because you are not allowed to search through the stack. There are ways in which you can do. For example, you can pop all the elements, store those in some data structure, and then keep on searching if you reach that element. And if it is there, then you can search. Then you can say that it exists. Otherwise, you say if you reach the end of the stack, then you say that it doesn't exist, and so on. So all of this is possible, but that is not a very natural operation on the stack. So typically, you will not see such a flexibility being given. This might be given for the sake of completeness, that you are using initially list and now you want to change it to a stack. So you might just provide that inefficient implementation, but that is not the natural way in which you will be specifying. Typically, that is going to be slower. You will require auxiliary storage, etc. Aniruddha says if it has to return stack top, return can't be void. That is correct. Yes. So that is another mistake which I have created. Yes, it cannot be void element, void as the return type. It has to have element as the return type. That is correct, Anil. Thanks for that. I'll correct that. Okay. So that sounds good. What about size? Well, we may not again be able to provide size, although you can keep track of it. Whenever you push an element, you can keep track of the size. But typically, size is required when you have, uh, let's say, some fixed size array or something. But a user typically will not be interested in size. From the user's perspective, stack is anyway a very, let's say, infinitely growing data structure, right? So therefore, the user will not be really interested in size, typical under a typical scenario. Instead, what the person will be interested in is in the underflow of the stack, which is empty function is going to be helpful here, where I am trying to remove element or pop element from the stack, but there is no element. So for that, the user might be interested in checking if the stack is non-empty. And again, because I cannot enumerate all the elements, I might not be able to afford a print function also. All right, so all of these are different functions which you can provide on the stack. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's come to the implementation of stack. So what is this that I'm showing here? Yeah, I'm showing the stack. Yeah, function called stack. Right. So we have, I mean, main function, we start execution from the main. Main might call certain function like we had done in our list program. Um this list L, and then on that we were inserting different elements, removing elements, printing, and then iteratively and recursively. So this print recursive might be a function that gets called from main, and then that calls itself with a different set of parameters, and then it calls itself again. So it gets called 3 times, and all of these 3 instances appear separately on the in the system memory in RAM. This RAM, the way we see it, is essentially growing in one direction. For example, if I am calling print recursive and after that I start printing a particular node, from there I get into actual printf or cout. Now, when I am inside printf, is it possible that suddenly print recursive will finish? Right? So that is not going to happen. First printf has to finish, then node : print has to finish, right? Print recursive might actually call some other function also, but that other function has to come into play only when node : print finishes, right? So there is a way in, I mean, if you visualize how these memory number of elements in this memory are increasing and decreasing, you will see that all the changes are happening at the top of the stack, top of this memory area. So essentially this is a stack. This is representing a, as Aniruddha says, this is a function called stack. Manichandra is asking, is it memory stack? Yes, it is stored inside the RAM. It's a part of the memory. But these are different function invocations, and therefore this is also called as a call stack, function call stack. Right, so this is how our method invocations are going to be happening, and this is all what happens in all our programs. Okay, so this is what something which we would like to somehow represent and implement. At the top, we represent a stack top, which means that all the operations that are being done are currently here in the current function that is being executed. And that also means that you cannot just go and change something in print recursive's invocation. Right? Of course, there will be variables which are global, which are not part of print recursive, which you can change and so on. So you can access arbitrary memory location, because although I'm showing it as a stack, these are all indexed memory location. This is an array, and therefore you'll be able to access arbitrary memory locations here. But the way it gets invoked, the way it gets maintained is as a stack. Therefore, actually this is called as a stack. So when we say that I allocated the auto variables inside C are allocated on stack, essentially that means that you are allocating it one by one onto the memory locations. And then you call a function that will create another block for the next function. Within that there might be some variables, and then that might call something else. There will be other set of variables and so on. So this is essentially a stack, and when this function ends, all of this memory is going to be in some sense not deallocated, but that is not going to be in use. You come back to the previous invocation, that is the caller of this method, and now those variables which were present, those you again keep manipulating. Then this function ends and you come back to their caller and so on. So all of this is essentially representing a stack in memory. Contrast it with heap, where we allocate memory using malloc or new, where the heap memory is allocated separately. So you have a block of memory. Within that you ask for, okay, I want some 32 bytes of memory. Then it will give you 32 bytes. It will mark that area as, okay, this memory area is given, this memory area is allocated. And then there will be some other memory, and then some other memory which you can allocate from, and so on. And when you don't require memory, you call free or delete, and that memory area will be marked as, okay, this is now free. So it will get added to something called as a free list, and then that memory area can be used for allocation for the next malloc and next new. So this maintenance of memory area, which we call as heap, that is also part of RAM. All of this is part of the same memory. It's just that their management is different. Here the stack grows in one direction, whereas heap, you can allocate memory from different places, right? And that memory area is typically kept separate, because heap is not growing only in one direction. Right? Heap, you can allocate memory depending upon your requirement. For example, I might allocate memory from here, right? And then I go on allocating memory at different contiguously, but then at some point something in the middle gets freed, So I might next time allocate memory from there. So the memory allocations, deallocations, maintenance is not happening at one place, unlike in stack. So these are called as two different kinds of memory, stacks and heap. Well, you can as well say that there is something called as global memory, and then there is static memory, and so on. So there is no such thing as static memory. It's just that the variables are static. Those are stored along with the global variables also. So global variables also are from RAM. Static variables are also stored inside RAM. All of these are coming from the same memory, just that they are divided into different parts. So there will be one small block which will be for global memory, where you will allocate only the global variables as well as static variables, right? Because their lifetime is the full program. So those are actually available along with the global memory locations. All right, so that's let's come to the stack implementation. And essentially, as soon as we come to the implementation, we have to worry about the design decision. So for example, I can decide whether I want to implement it using an array or a linked list, whether we allow typically traversing through the stack, which is not allowed usually. Can we query the stack size? Well, does your application that you are trying to support using a stack, sometimes you might know about the application, sometimes you might not know what are all the future applications that your data structure might support. In such cases, sometimes you just want to support bare minimum functions for the current set of applications. Whereas in some cases, you might want to be futuristic and support some of the stubs. Stubs meaning, let's say, empty functions. I support stack size, but well, that function doesn't do anything. Right? So it's a kind of defunct function. And but because you in the future you expect that some application might actually want to make use of this. Can you allow peeking at the stack top? That is, I don't want to pop the element. I want to check what the element is. Right? This can be very useful in some applications where, depending upon the stack top, you make a decision. Right? So this happens many times in the parsing also. Parsing meaning a compiler is going to go through your text, and depending upon the context it is at, it is going to look at what is the next character that it is seeing in your program, and depending upon that it decides, okay, I need to now perform this operation, or I'm expecting this to be an if statement, and so on. So all of these are going to require peeking at the top without retrieving. So sometimes some of the stack implementations might support such flexibility. But you can as well say that, okay, if I want bare minimum things to be given, then I can as well simulate stack top by, how will you simulate stack top? Peeking at the stack top. Right. So as Aniruddha suggests, this can be done by popping the element, checking what it is, and then pushing the element back. Right? So since you are performing operations only at one end, essentially this is going to simulate that you are peeking at the stack. Right? Then is empty, whether this function wants to be implemented by you as a designer of stack, or you want this is empty to be user's responsibility. Right? So, I mean, not that user is going to implement is empty, but essentially this means that whether you want is empty function to be invoked by the user, that is checked by the user, that is, it is user's responsibility to check that the popping is not happening if it is empty, or whether it is you as a designer, as an implementer of stack, who is going to check if the stack is empty or not when the user invokes a pop operation. Right? So that could be another design decision. Saichana says, why not just return A of top? Well, because we don't know if it is going to be implemented as array or linked list. Right? So of course, in both cases, you still have the information about the top. But pop is going to change the value at the top. That is the index top that you are talking about. That value is going to change as soon as you pop. Whereas in case of peek, it is not going to be the case. You want the stack top to not change. Why do we need to pop or push? Well, we would like to insert and remove elements from the stack, and therefore we would like to pop and push. Pop and push are remove and insert operations on stack. No, so peeking, you might not support peeking as a separate API. If it is supported, well and good. If it is not supported, then the user can do a pop and push it back. That's what we are saying. Alternatively, even peeking within as an API, you can support if you have already written pop and push operations and your manager asked you, okay, now support peek operation also. You can quickly implement it by popping and then pushing it again. That's what we are saying.
So, like, I mean, whether it's a linked list or an array, can't you just return the element? Like,
Yes.
why do you have to take out the element at all?
No, no, no. We said that yes, that is how peak is. That you just return that element. That is, you are correct. That a of top you can just return, and that is your peak. That is correct. However, in case that functionality needs to be simulated, you don't have a separate API for that. You can use pop and push.
Okay.
Okay. Anish says if we don't have the size of the stack, how would we know the top index if it is an array implementation? Correct. So in this case, the maximum uh, array size, the maximum array size, that is, you have allocated memory, that you need to know a prior. Because as you are pushing elements, you need to know if you have reached the stack top and whether you want to give an error or you want to, let's say, extend it by allocating memory, copying the elements, and so on. So for that, you need the maximum size of the array. But you need to know the top index definitely. So therefore, you will know if you have array-based implementation, you will know the stack size definitely if you are implementing it as an array. If you are implementing it as a linked list, then you may not know. That is correct. Any other concerns? Aniruddha says to Sai Charan, it is possible the stack top is private, so we need to push and pop to get the stack top value. Yes, that is also another. I mean, we cannot access A of top, but yeah. So, but the peak function will hopefully be able to give that. So, the final question that I have mentioned here is that stack top points to the last element or the entry next to that. So, for example, in the diagram that I have shown, stack top is pointing to printf, which is currently executing. That is what is typical. I mean, many implementations do that, but that need not always be the case. You can as well have stack top one element beyond that. So stack top will point to the invariant that you maintain is stack top always points to the last entry in the stack, or stack top points to the first empty entry in the stack, right? Which means that the element just above printf is the one that you will be pointing to. Depending upon that, your pop and push are going to get removed, get changed. So, but that could be your design decision because you want. I mean, let's say there are, yeah. I mean, there is no performance reason behind that. It might just be that is how you have implemented. Any questions on these design decisions? Any other design decisions that come to your mind? All right, so we'll move ahead. Let's look at stack.cpp, which is just an implementation. I mean, it's not an implementation of a stack, it's just a use of stack. So I think I have to stop presenting and then share the full screen. Let's do that. So I'm just going to show you how in C++ STL you can use the existing stack which we are going to implement. Let me present the entire screen. Okay, we'll get into recursive visualization. Okay, great. So now let's come to this. So I hope this is visible. Okay. So now what I have is again hash include IO stream, and then there is a an include header which is for the stack. So I just do hash include stack, and then there is a namespace called std in which essentially C in C out are written. The printf and scanf are written. So that I do so that I don't have to every time do std colon colon C in std colon colon C out, but it's your wish. Inside main, I define a variable of type stack. Now, last time we implemented list, we did not give any parameters. So this int is essentially a type of each element inside the stack. This is where the syntax is essentially a templatized parameter. So using templates in C++, you can implement that, but for now you don't have to worry about all of this part. You just follow this that I need stack of int. If you want stack of some other class or some other struct, you just give that. So struct X or class Y. In fact, you don't need to give class Y, you can just give Y, and that will define stack of Y S1, and that will create S1 having all those elements, right? I have never specified here how many elements I want to push, etc. Right? So it's just an empty stack at the start. And how does it ensure that? Well, when I do stack int s1, the stack's constructor is going to get invoked, and that will take care of allocating memory and all of this, making sure that the stack is empty. Right? So that part is done. Then what I do is I have this push operation. On S1, I am going to push some element I. The type of this element should be the same as what I have declared here. And I am pushing, let's say, 0 to 9 elements, 10 elements into this in a loop. And then while S1 is not empty, while that stack is not empty, I am going to I'm going to check the top element. So this is essentially peek that we were talking about. You are peeking at the element without removing. And then there is a pop also supported, using which you can pop the element, and then I'm just going to print it. The return type here should be the same as element, but how do you get a different return type depending upon what type of the element is? Well, that is where templates come into picture. You can define the return type also in a templatized way. And again, don't worry about that. Just remember this syntax. And these APIs are exactly same as what we have discussed. Push, this is peek, and this is pop. And I just print the element. So if I insert 0 to 9, I expect the output to be, if I insert 0 to 9, what is the output of this program? 91, right? So let's compile this. I print it, so I push 0 to 9, and then as I print, I get it in the reverse order. So this is definitely one way in which you can reverse a list by inserting elements into the stack and then just popping the elements, and you will get the reverse order. So that is our making use of stack library, which is inbuilt into standard template library of C++. We would like to now implement this as well. The reason why I am showing you this is not only because you should, know how to make use of a stack, but also that in later programs, in later part of the course, if we would like you to implement a stack, we will specify either you implement the stack yourself or you can make use of the existing stack. Right? So that is the reason why you should be aware of this. Okay, any questions? Okay, there is a question. Abhishek says that stack is also written in std. Stack, no, I don't know whether it is written in std. I think we can check that. If I do this, then all of this needs to be, I think it is there in std. Yeah, std colon stack is what we usually do. So I think this will clarify. So if I get an error, yeah, endl is also required to be. So yeah, it is asking me for So it is not able to find, so it has to be in std. Let's check. Endel is again there, line 70. Yeah, so you are right, it is also in many of these standard template library routines. I mean, the data structures are in std, so you are right that it is in std. Good. Manisha, pop doesn't return int here. Yes, you are right. So although the pop that we have discussed in the slide must return the type that we have, and I mean, I made a mistake there, but on the slide. But in C++, pop also essentially deletes the variable. It deletes meaning it calls the destructor of that variable. And therefore, what the designers have suggested is that if you want to pop an element, if you are interested in retaining it, you use top, that is p. That is, you make a copy of that and then make use of it. And pop is just going to destroy that element. The reason being that if you don't destroy the element on pop, then a lot of memory might get wasted. Right? So therefore, this is a conscious design decision that C++ STL designers have made, that pop will not return a value. Pop will, I mean, it will not return an element. If you want that top element, then you call the top function. Good observation. Any other concerns? All right. So we'll move ahead from here. Okay. So one specific application that comes up, and although I'm showing it in the context of balanced parenthesis, this is a very common application which you can think about as you imagine different kinds of parentheses. Right? So what is this problem? This says that we want to check if parentheses are balanced or not, given an expression of parenthesis, only parentheses, right? So there are no numbers, there are no operators, it's only parentheses, and we want to check if these are balanced or not. And maybe I can support different types of parentheses. Right? You can as well start from a single pair, but you can think that there are multiple types of parentheses. So all of these should be properly balanced, right? So what does that mean, properly balanced? Can somebody give me an example of what is an unbalanced parenthesis expression? Okay, that is one. So one way in which, yeah, so good. So you guys have given nice suggestions. Let's say that I provide, okay, so these are all unbalanced parentheses. Now, can somebody tell me how I can quickly check if the given expression is balanced or not? Any suggestions? Okay. So one thought that comes to my mind is, okay, Murari has to start with open and should be followed by similar closing type. Okay. Can somebody tell me some example of a good balanced parenthesis, sufficiently long balanced parenthesis expression? And I think that will help us discuss. Sai Charan says using stack pop a parenthesis only if its pair is found. Okay, it's not fully clear to me. Kaustubh says add to stack. Add to stack if you see an opening parenthesis and delete if you see a closing one. Yeah, this is also not precise. And there is a maintain stack for each type of parenthesis. Okay, so you can have 3 different stacks. That is one way. But what do you do inside the stack? I still want to know. Split into 2 and pop like stack each half. Check if they match. Okay, this is interesting. This a little bit of problem is there, but I think if we take some example of a balanced parenthesis, if you can give me, let's say 10 length balanced parenthesis expression, I think that will bring out the difficulty. Dilip says add opening brackets to stack. When closing brackets comes, the last element of stack should be the same. Right? So this seems like a good, precise explanation of the algorithm, and this also is likely to work, except for something. That's something you have to figure out. Anish has given an example. Yes, so this seems to be a valid balanced parenthesis expression, right? So you should apply your algorithm onto this and then refine it as desired. Aniruddha says push for open bracket, pop for close bracket. At the end, if stack is empty, we have balanced parenthesis, right? So okay. Okay, so since we are discussing stack, you are getting into stack, but there could be probably simpler ways to do that, right? So you should also think on those lines. Yeah, but that the idea seems to be all right. Pawan says if these or these are encountered, add to the stack, else check with top element in stack. If top element is not the same as current type, then it is not balanced. Yes, but there is something more which I think Aniruddha has suggested which needs to be added. Good. Nikhil says add opening brackets, and when closing brackets come, pop the opening and closing which should be at the top. Yes, that is correct. That is correct. Okay, but there is again something missing which Aniruddha has suggested. Okay, so sounds good. Yes, so all of these ideas are on the right lines, and but I thought that, I mean, stack we have discussed, but that doesn't mean that we should be using. So can't I do something like this, that I'm just going to keep a counter, and that counter is going to be done +1 as I come across a bracket. Okay, for now we'll assume that there is only opening parenthesis and closing parenthesis, and that I'll do +1, and before I complete -1, I think Murari and Anuruddha have already, and Anutosh have suggested the negative cases, right? So in this case it will not work. So there is some reason why, I mean, if you try to focus on this problem, you realize that I cannot just increment on seeing opening parenthesis and decrement on seeing closing parenthesis. One thing is that there are different kinds of brackets, but then if you keep those aside, what is happening is that the value of that counter is becoming less than 0 at some point. So as soon as I see a closing parenthesis, the value which starts from 0 is going to become negative. As soon as you become negative, that means you have an extra closing parenthesis. Extra meaning, yes, it might be followed by an opening parenthesis later, but you are not able to keep track of it. So this is a very important point, which some of you, if you are interested in the theory of computation, you will come across that counting is maintaining order 1 space, and that can only solve some problems. It cannot solve all the problems. So using counting, you will be able to figure out if the number of opening parentheses is the same as number of closing parentheses. But it cannot find out a balanced equation, balanced expression. Balanced expression requires order n space, which essentially is your stack. Right? So anyway, so for those of you who are interested, you can think about it. Okay. And then this will never be balanced. Yes, so all of these valid negative cases, and therefore keeping a counter is not going to be very useful. Right? It can be useful, but it is not sufficient. Okay, Anish says have 3 counters, add for opening, subtract for closing. If it ever becomes negative, it is unbalanced. Yes, so that is one good way to figure this out, that if it becomes negative, can I not say that now it is balanced or not? Right? Is there any example which tells you that I am using these counters, right, and still I am not able to use these 3 counters, and still it is unbalanced, although it is always positive? Is that possible to happen? So my question is that I am keeping these 3 counters, one for parentheses, another for braces, another for the brackets, and I add 1 and subtract 1, but in addition I am also maintaining the invariant, that the counter should never become below 0. If it becomes below 0, I say that it is unbalanced. But if it is greater than equal to 0, can I? Yeah, Aniruddha says at the end it should be 0. Yes, that is correct. So it has to be 0 at the end. But is there any example where the counter is always 0 or more in the whole execution of the algorithm, but it is unbalanced? Correct. Right? So this is one example where your counter is always positive, right, during the execution. No. So not Aniruddha's suggestion. I'm saying that actually there is a match of parentheses with respect to counters. So what Subodh and Mrityunjay have suggested, these are very interesting examples which will force your counter based algorithm to break. Right? So this you should be aware of. Therefore, counters alone cannot give you balanced parentheses. For balanced parentheses, you need order n space. Okay, so good. So that's what I wanted to come to. And the last part is about the zero part. That is when you are using a stack. Right? So we said that we are going to require order n space. In this case, it is going to be stacked. As soon as you see an opening parenthesis bracket brace, you push it to the stack. When you get a closing part, you check if it is matching with the stack top. That is important. If it matches, then you pop both the elements and remove, and you continue doing that. But only doing that is not important. In the end, you also need to check if the stack is empty. Right? So if I'm using this stack, can you give an example? So for example, Anirudh's example is the one that if I'm using this algorithm, that whenever I see a closing parenthesis, whether the stack top matches with the opening parenthesis of that type, then on the example that Aniruddha has given, it will work. Right? So closing parenthesis, and then it will match the top two elements. I'll remove them, and then there is end of string. So I just declare that it is balanced parenthesis, but that is not, because I need to check at the end that the stack is empty, or only if stack is empty, then I can see. I hope all these points are clear via examples, and I'm going to now put all of these things together and create our algorithm. Right? So thanks for that discussion. So just some valid inputs and some invalid inputs, which some of you have already given. And all these three are important ones. Please see that those counters are going to be maintained here, right? But this will go into negative, right? So this we can take care of by making sure that it is not becoming negative. As far as this is, however, concerned, this doesn't go into negative, but this is an unbalanced parenthesis, and this needs to take care of the stack being empty at the end. Right? Okay, so you guys have already given the algorithm, and I'll show you that. The question here is, can we design an application of a stack from its ADT without knowing its implementation? What do you suggest? So can we design an application? So like balanced parenthesis is an application. Right? If I don't tell you the implementation of stack, which we have not done so far, can you still design the application? Okay, Aniruddha says yes, Murari says yes. Kaushik says we should probably be able to, sure. Okay, so this is one important point, that you are able to develop an algorithm just from the interface of that data structure, just from the API, just from the ADT. You don't need the implementation. You just need that class header. These are the public APIs, and I'll be able to start developing my application. So this is where in software engineering, that once you design the software, before you get into the coding, you finalize on the API. And then the implementer of that library, that class, is going to go implement those APIs, and the application developer is going to design the application using those API, and both of them can work in parallel. This is a very important point about the ADTs, right? So this I just wanted to highlight here. Okay, I think we'll kind of stop here, but essentially we'll discuss this algorithm again in next class. Okay, any questions? Okay, so if there are no questions, then I'll stop recording.
Hello,
Yeah, go ahead.
sir. Your that course is there, no? OOPS course in IITM. Do we have videos for that or only slides?
I didn't understand. What?
Sir,